What's up, everybody? This is Karak with ACG, and as always, it's my continuing mission to bring you videos that aren't 2 minutes long or filled with sponsored bullcrap. Today, it's finally time to take a look at my initial impressions of Division 2. Now, Division 2 is made by Ubisoft, and it's out now for those who got the premium and higher editions, and it's out Friday for the standard edition. Division 2 is a multiplayer open city shooter that spreads beyond the snowy magical majesty of Manhattan's confines and sees agents of the Division exploring Washington, D.C. 7 months after the events of the first game. Yes, it also allows for you to close car doors. These impressions are based on about 20 to 25 hours of playing, exploring, upgrading, crafting, and jumping into pickup games, as well as making a clan and a bit of Dark Zone fun. Let's see how it's done so far, shall we? As always, if you like the video, maybe subscribe or share it. So here are my initial impressions of Division 2. The Washington, D.C. chapter of Sons of Anarchy, graham cracker armor, and the terror of seeing the words, "No respawn allowed." Let's begin. Graphics are up first. Now, while I spent a majority of my time on the PC, I did get to do a little bit of work on the Xbox and PS4 versions, which I'll cover more in depth during the review and in the podcast this week. I do have to say, all the consoles, including basic and premium versions, did see some stutter in a couple battles and just traversing the land, and a steady FPS wasn't always there, especially if you're doing the Xbox X and the 30 FPS mode or the PS4 Pro and its mode. Now, this is strangely enough not the same experience that many have had in the beta. While I have seen a large number of people reporting massive stuttering on PS4 systems in particular, I didn't have as many problems, but I will report back on that podcast or later in the review. I'm not sure what's going on exactly there. On the Xbox X, if you're running 1080p or 1440p and on a display that allows for it, you can turn on the 120 refresh rate in the console options as well, though on 4K the game does run at your 30 FPS. Also, it looks like once again we have dynamic resolution on the consoles, which is expected for a game like this from Ubisoft, but really there isn't that much of a difference between the different versions other than resolution, which I actually liked. As for the PC, it honestly runs incredibly well. A 1070, all settings on high with some on ultra, with a modern i7 is absolutely going to be possible, locked or above 60 FPS. Now again, you will have to fiddle with some of those settings, depending on your PC and your RAM. And the PC version also has a large number of PC settings, and it's no Serious Sam, which damn near let you leap into the game engine and change everything there. But you do have options for distance streaming materials, render scaling, various shadow settings, and a nice blurb about what each one does to inform you. How does it all come together, though? First, I want to talk about overall the atmosphere, and Washington, D.C. is surprisingly fresh as a location, gone are the snowy tight corridors of Manhattan, replaced with garbage and clutter-filled streets, consistently war-torn between various groups, and a more lived-in feeling to the world than Division 1 ever had. Also, plain and simple, DC went to shit in 7 months. The first time you see it, you're gonna go, where the hell did everyone get the concrete berms? Or how is it that so many people don't give a shit about gasoline? Because some of the battle locations look like someone filled about 100 tanks of gasoline from a local Shell station, then ejaculated them around town on the world's most flammable happy ending known to man. For me, though, what was the most noticeable was the design and the wickering of organic location mixed in with the main mission elements that worked so well here. So far, DC actually feels exactly as it should, a world that is in the same horrible, sinking, life-altering boat that Manhattan was in, but with its own unique feel. And the weather effects here are excellent, from vision-choking smoke and fog to heavy rains that obscure not only your vision, but your ability to identify where that dude who wants to see if he can use you as a friggin' spaghetti strainer later on is actually hiding. It works very well, and while snow does not fall in the Division 2, the replacement weather system, including heavy rain and different times and weather effects, all mixed together to really offer something new, even though we probably all wanted to see at least one blizzard. Let's jump to character models, NPCs, and guns for a moment. Now, this is a noticeable step up from Division, while not perfect in its own right. There's a physicality in their movements that's beyond the prior title, and impacts on enemies as you send them stumbling and sliding and grabbing for body parts makes it feel like the impacts have more force behind them. This is especially noticeable in busy fights when hitting an enemy and causing them to slide and stumble can easily be the difference between you blowing another enemy away or you sitting there halfway through the reload of a heavy machine gun as some shotgun carrying punk rounds a corner and tries to see if they can punt your friggin' head into space. Now, there are some issues. For example, the main NPCs in the cutscenes have a very weird look to them, like everyone bathed themselves in that anti-wrinkle cream, but it only worked on just particular parts of their face. Also, lip syncing and just overall lip animation and facial animations during speaking are not the best, to be sure. When it comes to the characters themselves, though, and the ones you make, and create, I have to say, I'm impressed a bit. The first time you're under fire by 3 enemies all blazing towards you with auto shotguns, and you have to sit and watch the lengthy but incredibly detailed process of reloading a Sawa under heavy pressure. It's incredibly well done, and weapon add-ons that change stability stats actually make subtle changes to the animation as well. However, goddamn, the rolling animation in this game looks goofy. It's like recess in 3rd grade whenever you leap out, and Division 2 suffers from the same issue Division 1 did. There's no real way to clear the middle ground without looking like a goddamned fool. Sprinting is fine, but usually unwanted as a tactic, especially if enemies are in front of you, so you can roll to dodge a couple of their shots, but the way you fling yourself into oblivion just looks really odd. Also, up-close attacks are terrible, with canned swinging of your gun in some wild arc that never really looks like it hits and usually just looks like you decided to pretend your rifle was a paper airplane as you made flying sounds in the air. Cover, and its various systems of debris and thrown-up particle effects, is the pinata bonanza that we were probably all hoping for, as every element of cover sends shards up into the air with every strike of any bullet. Now, speaking of exploding splodiness, the armor breaking from bad guys is really satisfying. Most enemies have elements of armor that protect them that can be shot off. For example, on rushing enemies, if you shoot their helmet, the front shatters. Main bad guys' armor comes off their shoulders and torsos, and it does a better job offering a less spongy feeling to enemies than the prior title did, by a dramatic amount actually. When it comes to performance, as I said, I haven't got a ton of time to sit with the consoles other than to say that occasionally they're a bit stuttery. PC has some settings you may want to check, like distance streaming, which seems to cause a lot of issues for people who are reporting it, as well as the various shadow settings. The performance is noticeably improved from the beta, depending of course on what settings you want on high or ultra. As a package, Division 2 does something surprising. It does look like Division 1.5, for sure, that was their plan. But at least on PC, it's got a fair bit of improvements that work really well to offer some changes bookended within that framework. Sound, music, and voice.
Got an SOS from the castle settlement and haven't been able to re-establish contact. Get over there when you can. True Sons tends to harass them quite a bit, so they may need help.
And this time in the audio trilogy, we're going to start with music first. This is good if you hear it. Now, I say that because while it plays a very heavy synth series of tracks as you play, the world is much more about sound than making you feel like you're someone riding a horse in a real-world enactment of Ride of the Valkyries. Bosses and main battles have excellent music overall, and I dug the tracks. It's just that, for the most part, this isn't a game where you will probably notice it that much. When you do, you might think, damn, this is really good, but aside from some cutscenes and other more solitary times, you may not hear it that much. And of course, that brings us to voice. This isn't bad. You do end up hearing or recognizing a number of the Ubisoft staples that we've seen in some of their other games, but they do a good job hiding it overall. It's not like, say, Skyrim, where the same 3 dudes play 40 people all in the same town. All of them seem to do fine, and as they continue to help you deep dive into the story, no one seems like they're reading directly from a script. One part I absolutely continued to like here is the moments of sheer panic and informative vocals during fights from your AI teammates. As they call out what's occurring around them, sound generally terrified, then hide behind a ballad for 30 seconds as you single-handedly 1980s movie star your way through a never-ending tide of enemies who all shopped at the same motocross store for their gear. Overall, this was good, but nothing really outstanding. I did like some of those battle elements, though. And when it comes to battle, sound is going to be important, so let's jump to that next. Luckily, I did not run into the sounds of gunfire disappearing bug that has happened to so many people in the beta so much, and what I have here is a mixture of 2 things. 1, an attention to detail and giving all the caliber of weapons a nice robust difference, as well as heavy processing on the sound. You can hear the changes when you rush through a tight tunnel and the sample tightens down and loses all directional focus and then spreads out again when you come out of the other side. It is a small element, but it's something that's missed in some games. Directional sound works incredibly well here, and the game offers a couple settings to adjust internal processing like headphones, stereo, home theater, and so on. Overall, I do like the gun sounds a tremendous amount. The first time you hear the almost chainsaw fast cyclic rate of one of the SMGs, it's like walking into a damned popcorn popper someone sped up the recording sample from. One thing I do have an issue with is this game does end up doing the same thing as all other games, and yes, it has suppressors in the game that do work on the Steven Seagal quiet as a whisper silencer mode. Everything else works just fine. And of course, that brings us to gameplay and a bit about the story. And the story is not something Division 1 did very well. Division 2 sort of continues that in ways. It sets up an atmosphere and then runs you through a fairly bog standard main story. However, it's the side story where everything feels organic and are filtered out to you. For example, as you're making your way to a main mission, you might hear folks trying to rescue a hostage picked up by the local gang for unspeakable acts used at a later time. So you just bust in, you take them out, and then save that hostage. Then you hear gunfire, and that pulls you out of your mission zone to go and help a number of refugees fight off a couple patrolling bad guys, or you might try to take down the supplies that the enemies are trucking through the wasteland of the city, which then causes you to roll into another battle between other groups. And all of this is reflected a little bit by the vocals and the story and different reactions you may get when you go back to town. And I really dug the way the side stories were introduced. While not exactly free of the tropes that we've seen before, Division 2 does what Far Cry has not actually been able to do very well, which is offer these side stories without looking like complete anarchy is happening all the time. And yes, it does happen occasionally here, but the confines in which the world's presented allows for a solidly built foundation of realistic strife between groups instead of, say, a wildcat trying to attack an SUV in Far Cry. Of course, Division 2 doesn't completely change the game. It's typical stuff, rolling you through side missions and main missions to level up, with all of them labeled as to what they offer for completion. As you're doing them and exploring the world, you're also upgrading various safe houses and main locations around the world, and that's one place Division 2 does a good job. That continued upgrade of older locations gives you a very real reason to return to them. Take, for instance, the shooting range that allows for you to really test what guns may work for you best, which can be a big change, especially if you aren't finding that one gun you want, but you have another one that's higher level, and this causes you to return to the White House to go to that shooting range. Now, speaking of levels, how does all this work? Well, like most games, it gives you experience points, missions, side missions, exploring, upgrading, killing, not being killed, and helping kill others who tried to kill your friends while they were trying to kill them, and so forth. When you go up in levels, you get higher and higher level weapons, as well as maybe buy into a large series of perks and outfit your division agent with 2 skills. Perks themselves range from carrying more inventory to unlocking more suppressor styles for guns to making it more advantageous when you help out an outpost the good guys control by making items in the game world easier to detect for a particular amount of time. This cycle of gameplay works really well in Division 2 and keeps you coming back to add more and more perks to your list, with each having a number of levels and cost associated to the shade or SHD currency you find out in the game world. The next element, of course, is your skills. These are machinery based, like having a turret, human seeking mines, a bullet shield, and more. And not only can you adjust what each does, for example, I chose the grenades, which at first sought out one enemy. Then I chose an upgrade to make them seek out many enemies but did less damage. Then I switched for ones that shot into the air and did damage, and then moved back to the cluster type because I liked the way they felt. But you can also mod them with special graphical abilities as well as their own attribute adjustments, like, for example, giving them more hit points before an enemy can destroy them. And that tit for tat really is where the combat in Division 2 is at. First, the good. When Division 2 is working, it's working well, with enemies flanking, engagements constantly requiring a person to think their way through each moment, and a robust difficulty scaling that allows for folks to jump into your game that are of different levels and play with you, even though that's not actually perfected. It really is a pop and stop kind of game, and that works well here, with cover playing an active role in every battle. Even if you're sniping someone from far off, an enemy will find a way to get to you regardless. Cover can be blind fired from as well as adjusted around, and while it's tighter than Division 1, don't expect it to be perfect, as there will be times where it appears for all intents and purposes that your division agent is deathly afraid of trash cans and simply can't move past one. Time to kill also is improved, and while sponginess, depending on weapon level, is still here, there's a bit more lethality overall. I mean, it is a game about leveling items, so if you go into it wondering why an M16 at level 1 isn't doing much damage to a high-level enemy, that'd be the same question for a sword in a fantasy game. It's a design conceit you have to become accustomed to if you want to jump into these games. Regardless of the level, they all send lead downfield. Overall, that combat feels good with or without modifications like the adjusted sights and scopes and hand rests and more. While recoil for some guns may be a bit weak overall, they are at least adequately represented, and the requirements for playing the game with an SMG and a shotgun as your primary and secondary is going to be different than playing with a sniper rifle and an LMG. That is, until you sort of realize that for whatever reason, the shotguns aren't really that good. Their drop-off is tremendously fast. It's a stat you can see in the game's weapon stat screen, which I admit is excellent, showing every bonus and penalty on what skill or item that they come with. But even with an epic auto shotgun, it just never felt exactly like there was a reason to use that versus the auto rifles, which do some tremendous damage but can also reach out farther and kill people. I could be wrong, and I'll report more on that when I jump into the review and the podcasts. Of course, all this shooting and scooting wouldn't matter if the enemies weren't good. Sadly, I'll say that this is where Division 2 does fall down a bit. Is it terrible? No, but let's not pretend it's a bunch of friggin' Mensa members running around with their guns out there. It's less Stephen Hawking and a bit more Steven Tyler. 80% of the time, it's fine, flanking, covering, pincer movements, and even a good amount of sustained fire to keep you pinned down. Those moments make you feel like the enemies are intimately aware of the environments, but 10% of the time they're in panic mode. I guess that's also fine, as this mimics some reactions in combat, but it's not really what seems to be going on here, or Ubisoft needs to have more of an emphasis on panic states being vocalized. Though there are some, there's just not enough for what's going on screen. The last 10% of the time, though, they straight up lose their minds, and you find yourself down in some bad guy who decided to deck himself out in armor that's apparently made of car doors and bank vault walls, and then, while he's laying down a suppressive fire, your vision's filled with some damned renob rubbing his body across every fucking structure in the game world like he has chicken pox, and he's just like, scratch me! Due to the heavy number of gunfights in the Division 2, this is going to be noticeable a bit more than it might be in other games. Now, it seems improved from Division 1, but at least so far, the mistakes, when they happen, are actually a bit more noticeable. And while every game is not going to be perfect, it does feel like Division 2 has a bit of a problem, both with your mid-range movement game when it comes to the animations, and the enemy's mid-range game when it comes to actions. One thing that does help this tremendously is the enemies have more variation than they did in the prior game by a good amount, and the mixing and matching is far more robust, offering you some pretty difficult mission assignments later on. Between missions, you can go and donate found items to upgrade the strongholds you've taken over, as well as buy and sell items at vendors. When it comes to online, there's not a ton of surprises here. You can join up with others, create clans, and go out and about and freely find random agents for jobs in PvE or in the Dark Zone PvP. Joining and grouping up worked exactly as expected, but I will be covering more of it as I continue to play, as well as the ratio of difference when jumping into games with wildly divergent levels of players. When it comes to the Dark Zone itself, what time I've spent there is mostly just coming to grips with how everything works. It feels like Dark Zone 2.0, and for many this is going to be an improvement, but for anybody who wanted something magically completely different, they're going to be disappointed. I'll keep you up to date on that. Also, another improvement here is the ability to solo the game. You can end up soloing it far better than you could in the original, and there's much less level gating than there ever was in Division 1. Lastly, let's talk about two things. First, the HUD. It still has that sort of blasé feel to it, where in one screen one button does something, but then in the next it doesn't. Then in one deeper it seems to do the same thing it should have done already. I really do feel that these HUDs could have some paring down and a bit less try everything everywhere and a bit more try this one thing here kind of mentality applied to it. Additionally, there are microtransactions. They're in here. They are cosmetic. You can do the skins for the guns. You can do the various clothing effects. I hate them being in here. Luckily, I unlocked a ton when I was just playing the game, but they are here. So if you are dead set against microtransactions, absolutely, this is not the game for you. And what would impressions be without fun factor? So despite some technical issues, the AI at times made me question my and everybody else's sanity. I actually have to say Division 2 has turned out to be a very fun game overall, and there's various reasons for that. One, of course, is the enemy makeup in the different group situations. The second is the solo ability that you have in this game that just didn't feel like it existed as well in Division 1. The third easily has to be a cosmetic change, and that's the exploding armor off of people. And yeah, it can look a little goofy at times, but it does make the game feel just a bit more present and a bit more impactful for what you're doing. Of course, this is one of those kind of games, as I said before, where you are just leveling up items. So if you can't accept that kind of thing, this isn't even the game for you anyway. So that is it for me and my impressions. I'll be doing continued discussion about this on the International Podcast. I would love for you guys to stop by. It's 10:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on Fridays. As always, you can follow me on Twitch and Twitter and Facebook. You can listen to any of the podcasts in audio form on Anchor and iTunes. Those are also in the description. And of course, you can become a patron. If I've ever found you a game you didn't expect or saved you a little bit of cash, you can jump to the Patron. You can jump into our Discord if you're a member of the Patron and enjoy some games with us. We've got private game servers. We've got people doing everything from role-playing to Dungeons and Dragons to board games. It is an absolutely excellent Discord and one of the best communities in gaming. Peace out. and enjoy the rest of your week.